At the Melkite Church in Bethlehem, Christians of the Holy Land have offered special prayers for the people of Egypt. Our appeal for charitable works carried out by friars of the custody of the Holy Land in Egypt. 7 cardinals and 250 bishops from 5 continents were in the Holy Land recently, in an impressive experience of pilgrimage and communion. Hogar Niño Dios, the house of the divine child. We get to know the sisters of the Word Incarnate and the particular welcome which they offer in Bethlehem. It's called St. John in the Desert, but it's a luxuriant oasis which nevertheless invites the pilgrim to be alone with God, just as John was in the desert.
Out of Egypt I have called my son. With this quotation from the prophet Hosea, prayers for justice and peace for the people of Egypt began. At the Melkite Church in Bethlehem on Sunday, February the 6th, many came to be united in prayer for their Middle Eastern neighbours.
We Palestinians are part of the Arab world. Egypt is at the heart of the Arab nation. Everything that is happening in Egypt at the moment is painful to us. We are praying for Egypt so that she may know peace, security and stability. We are also praying for the young so that they may know liberty and safety.
The links between the Holy Land and Egypt are biblical and blessed by the journey made there by the Holy Family. Beginning with that flight into Egypt and the difficulties and inconveniences experienced by Joseph, Mary and the child Jesus, Father Peter de Broel, the Jesuit who gave the homily, offered a spiritual commentary on what is happening in our part of the world.
In spite of everything, we must have faith. I think of Jesus and peace, and it is precisely He who can bring peace in the midst of turmoil. Only He can bring peace in the midst of occupation, and peace in the midst of corruption.
Appropriately, one remembers that peace comes from on high and that this is reflected in the sung litany with which this divine liturgy, according to the Oriental Greek Catholic rite, began.
More than 10 million Coptic Christians live in Egypt, and we Christians of the Holy Land feel close to Christians there, and also to the Muslims who are likewise longing for justice, peace and social tranquility. A few days ago, a Coptic Egyptian from the south told me that he no longer had fresh bread. This is really pitiful. And we hope that the good Lord will help us miraculously. Here too we wait for a miracle of justice and peace, because we human beings have not been able to establish this justice and peace, not in Egypt, not in Tunisia, and not in the Arab world of the Middle East generally. Franciscan friars of the custody are present in Egypt. Today they care for the large friary of Moski, seat in ancient times of the Latin parish of Cairo, and which has been almost empty since the Egyptian Revolution of 1952. At that time, in order to make better use of the premises, a Centre for Christian Oriental Studies was created with the aim of developing Oriental studies of the Christian communities of the Middle East. With its valuable library and important studies and research, activities at Moski make important cultural contributions to the Christian and Muslim worlds. But the Cairo friars are also helping the impoverished people of the densely populated district of Moski, particularly the children. There is a lack of basic necessities, daily bread and urgently needed medicines. The poverty and hunger which has affected Egypt in general for quite some time, especially in the disadvantaged suburbs of Cairo, has worsened in these days of rioting, calling for increasing aid. The Moski district, which is located only minutes away from the square in which the major demonstrations have been held, is slowly returning to normality, said the Franciscan superior, Father Vincenzo Ianello, whom we contacted by telephone in Egypt. But the people who were already living in poverty, he continued, are now in a precarious situation, and many come to the doors of the Franciscan friary seeking assistance in urgent cases. In these days of tension, it is possible to make a difference by supporting the charitable works of the Franciscan Friars of the Holy Land in Egypt. For further information, visit the site www.proterrasancta.org.
7 cardinals and 250 bishops were recently in the Holy Land. Many were bishops and prelates who were attending a meeting organized by Domus Galileae, the centre operated by the Neocatechumenate, on the Mount of Beatitudes overlooking the Sea of Galilee. From every continent and many countries, the bishops experienced keen ecclesiastical communion.
È un luogo unico.
This is an unique place, a unique experience. We come from all over the world, assembled together where the Beatitudes were proclaimed by Jesus, and going up to Jerusalem as successors of the apostles in a tangible experience of the birth of the Church, for it all started here 2,000 years ago, in communion, in reality, and is alive today because Christ is risen.
How do you see the current situation of Christians in the Middle East?
With great pain and sadness, yet also with hope, because there have always been many great difficulties for Christians in this land, in this Middle East, but their faith has overcome many difficulties. We are all concerned about the current situation, with its suffering, division and violence, but I hope that our presence will remind local Christians that they have not been forgotten.
For these pastors of the Church, successors of the Apostles, this coexistence pilgrimage to the Holy Land has taken them to the very origins of their faith and mission, and given them a new opportunity to reflect the requirements of a new evangelization.
The Pope has asked us to implement a new evangelization, and it is important that in this new reality, the neo-catechumenate way be shared with the whole Church. And the Holy Land is an almost essential place where Christians can rediscover a closeness to Christ, sense the heartbeat of Jesus, and renew their lives. We can say that the water which flows here is a source, that here are our roots. Here is a place where the breath of the Spirit has blown. I have chosen as a motto a phrase from an anonymous Piacenza pilgrim who came here in 600, keeping an account of his travels. Leaving Piacenza with friends, he came on pilgrimage in the footsteps of Christ, and so I chose this motto because everyone should always walk in the footsteps of Christ. The new charisma, called the evangelization of culture, affects many areas: hospitals, schools and parishes, as well as works of mercy. To offer this witness on a daily basis, the Sisters of the Word Incarnate, established only a few meters from the Basilica of the Nativity in Bethlehem, run a home for disabled children. 21 children are accommodated in the Hogar Niño Dios, the House of the Divine Child, because they have been abandoned or are disabled, in some cases seriously, or because they know a difficult family situation in which they cannot be looked after properly.
They are children who live in an unusual situation. For example, Bedouins whose dwellings have no heating, or children with heart conditions, and who cannot live at home because there is neither water nor electricity, children whose mothers have asked us to look after them.
There are only 5 sisters available to care for the children, who need constant care, although there are 2 women, one to clean and the other to cook. However, in addition, there are also very helpful volunteers, most of whom are Italian.
Yes, night and day, from 6 in the morning until 6 the following day. A particular sister sleeps with the children as a nurse.
The Community of the Word Incarnate is an Argentine Catholic congregation founded in 1984. After 25 years, the sisters were able to open homes in areas of the Middle East where evangelization is a challenge: Gaza, Iraq, Syria, Jordan and Egypt. Sister Maria, who has recently arrived in Bethlehem, had been at a home in Alexandria. but this had to be temporarily closed for security reasons.
Sí, hay muchísima violencia.
In Egypt, there are children who are victims of violence. We try to house the most needy. The number of poor children in Egypt is very high. We simply cannot accept them all, because we have neither sufficient space nor enough sisters. In Egypt, it is the children in particular who are suffering.
Relying on providence is part of the charisma, and the house in Bethlehem is partly funded by the Latin Patriarchate in Jerusalem and partly through donations by people of goodwill.
La casa dove siamo adesso non è casa nostra, no? Ci sono molti bambini che...
The house in which we are now is not ours. There are many children who wanted to come and live with us, but there wasn't enough space for all of them. But thanks to Unitalsi, we were able to effect alterations to make the house much larger. Nevertheless, we need extra funding because we have insufficient money to pay for the extensions. We are in difficulty, having been here for 10 months, waiting and hoping for financial help from generous people so that we may return to our own house and welcome other children. If one were to be invited to visit the Franciscan sanctuary of St. John of the Desert without knowing its particular character, one would surely expect to see expanses of sandy terrain. Yet here is the unexpected, a haven of lush greenery. It is a scene that characterizes the village of Ein Karem, held to be the celebrated town in the hill country of Judea, and therefore perhaps the place where John, who would become the Baptist, was born, and where we may imagine that he spent his childhood. Nevertheless, it is a place where one may know those areas of withdrawal, be they deserts or oases, where God may more easily speak to the heart. At the same time, Friar Frederick Mantz makes it clear that the saint who is venerated here knew the kind of barren surroundings that the pilgrim might have been expecting.
Tutti I grandi profeti sono stati nel deserto, a cominciare da Mosè, da Elia.
John was brought up in the desert. All the great prophets experienced the desert, beginning with Moses and Elijah, and John was the new Elijah. He had to spend time in the desert, just as the children of Israel did, for 40 years. For while water purifies the body, the desert purifies the soul.
Situated not far from Jerusalem, the site was bought by the Franciscan custody of the Holy Land from the Latin Patriarchate in 1911, and a new church and convent, designed by the celebrated architect Antonio Barluzzi, were inaugurated in 1922. Here pilgrims were able to recall the words of the prophet Isaiah. A voice cries, "Prepare in the desert a way for the Lord, make a straight highway for our God across the wastelands." In fact, the Friary of St. John of the Desert is not far from that desert, where only one's own footsteps break the silence, and where one cannot but be introspective in the best sense of the term. Perhaps one may think of the Simon and Garfunkel song, The Sounds of Silence. Better to remember that Elijah did not find God in an earthquake, wind or fire, but in the still, small voice which one can hear only in solitude. For here, in the desert, the pilgrim, like John, can truly be alone with God.